good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for downloading the Faith Life podcast of Discovery Fellowship Church. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here with my co-host, Pastor Matt.
Hey, guys.
And we are recovering from Halloween. It's been a couple of days. Did you have fun?
Yeah, it was great.
I was sick, so I was in bed.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun. My kids had fun, though.
I was hanging out in my front yard, had fire pits going, hot chocolate, lots of candy. Lots of people came by. It was awesome. Yep.
That's great. We had a lot more people in our neighborhood apparently than we've had in the past couple of years, and it's really kind of cool. So
I love it.
I like seeing people come back out. I think everybody's been stuck inside for a couple of years, almost like, I don't know, trick-or-treating in general seems to have dropped off. Now, I know a lot of people don't decorate as much anymore, at least not in my neighborhood, compared to how they used to. And so that makes it maybe seem less likely for people to want to trick-or-treat, and it just kind of feeds on itself.
My neighborhood was awesome. Lots of houses like
decorated,
really decked out.
See, that's cool.
I did a couple fun things for decorations this year and had a lot of people stopping to film it.
That's kind of
which
fun.
was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you make it onto like the top 10 Halloween houses of Fort Collins?
No, I'm not that cool.
No,
but I was top 10 in my neighborhood. I think I was the only one who used like some digital projection type stuff.
I know. I wish I could. You have video of it though, right?
I do have some video.
I'd like to see it at some point. Well, as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a minute, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are watching or listening to this. If it's on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to us there. Leave us a comment below. Let us know what you're thinking. But we're going to jump right into our news segment. I had a couple things I saw. I don't know, Matt, if you had anything, but the first thing, this was just kind of, we'll go a little bit light and then maybe a little bit gradations of seriosity. Is that a word?
It is now.
It should be.
Yeah.
So I think that the first one, so Apple had this event to show off their new M3 processor, and every Apple event is the same. It's like, here's how it's so much better and how it's going to revolutionize everything and blah, 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 whatever. But then at the end, they were like, and everything here was shot on the iPhone 15.
Right.
And it was like, whoa, this looks really cool. Now, some people are like pushing back on it because they're like, well, yeah, you shot it on that phone, which is great, but you also had really expensive lighting and gimbals,
lighting and audio and
right. Yeah. And so it's like, but at the same time, it's an interesting thing because I think, as we've done more multimedia stuff, even here, we've learned the cameras are important, but your audio and your lighting and like everything else actually is just as important anyway. So the camera is only a small piece of it anyway. So to me, that doesn't seem controversial that that's how they did it.
Right.
I don't know. It was just weird that people were like upset. They're like, well, but you still had to do a bunch of other stuff. It's like, well, yeah, that's anytime you're shooting and filming.
So wait, you're saying that people get upset over seemingly trivial things?
I know, it's crazy.
That's weird.
The next thing I saw, this is local to us, but I think this type of thing goes around every year. Somebody sent this to me this morning. It was on Nextdoor, which I don't know if you've ever used Nextdoor.
I have.
It's, to me, a little bit silly a lot of the times. Yep. But this one was a mom saying she got a bunch of Tootsie Rolls that had sewing needles jammed through them when they went trick-or-treating. And every reply was like, oh, this is horrible. Make sure you report it to the police. She's like, I did. But they don't really seem interested in investigating, which to me tells me something.
Right.
Like when the people who actually investigate these things were out at the scene, they're like, okay, thanks. And didn't really seem too perturbed. What do you think, Matt? Is the narrative true that people are, razor blades and apples and needles and Tootsie Rolls?
Yeah, I'm skeptical over this because there hasn't been any other reports outside of this one social media post.
Right. And here's the thing that's interesting. They post, the neighborhood they're in.
Yeah.
You'd imagine other people in that neighborhood would have been posting about it then.
Right. If I saw that and I was like, oh my goodness, I trick-or-treated in the same area. Let me go through all the candy. And then I also found a needle. Then, okay, we can have a different conversation. They also turned off all comments on that post, like the author of the post did, because people started saying, I'm skeptical of this.
Interesting.
And posting links to how it potentially is a scam. A cry for attention, maybe. It could be real. I don't know. I looked into it a little bit after you told me about it.
Yeah.
And it's been a very small handful of times where there's actually confirmed cases of people tampering with candy.
Yep.
And yeah, it's never been like this grand conspiracy thing.
Right.
One was like a 12-year-old boy who was visiting family from out of state. and just thought it was a funny prank and got charged and prosecuted. One was a severely...
What did he do?
Put needles in candy.
Oh, needles. Okay.
One was a severely mentally ill person.
Okay.
Who then couldn't be tried because of his mental illness. He actually went to
Wow.
like a corrective facility for like a mental health facility.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it seems from what I've seen, it's not nearly as common as we might
People are afraid.
hear about, or at least the reality of it. And I was looking at some police reports as well, and the vast majority of reports end up being hoaxes.
That's interesting.
Which is interesting because then you can also then be prosecuted for a false report.
Right. So I think that when I was doing some research on this, like anything going wrong in Halloween, trick-or-treating candy and stuff, I found one case. And so what happened, this guy, it was in the late 70s.
Okay.
This guy took his kids trick-or-treating. He went to a few houses. There was one house with the lights all dark, all off. They went up and nobody answered the door. His kids went on. He called up a minute later and said, oh, there was somebody in the dark and I didn't really see their face, but they opened the door and handed me these pixie sticks. And they went home. And then the kid wanted some candy. He took one of the pixie sticks. After saying it tasted weird, his dad gave him some Kool-Aid, and then the kid started like convulsing. He was like 8. And then he took him to the hospital, but he died on the way. And they found there was cyanide in the pixie sticks.
Okay.
And so everybody's like, oh no, there's somebody doing it. And so the police definitely, they stepped in, they started looking at it. The pixie sticks had been opened and restapled, so you could tell somebody had tampered with them. And then they were trying to like, all right, which house was it? And so the guy at first was a little like, I can't remember, but they didn't go to that many houses. After walking around the neighborhood like 3 times with the police, this guy's like, oh yeah, it was this one for sure. And so they went and they were checking the house. Turns out the guy who lived there is like an airline pilot and was gone he didn't get back till way late that night because he was flying. And so then they found out as they were investigating what happened is this guy had taken out increasingly larger life insurance policies on his own kids and had all sorts of financial problems. So in the end, he would asking people like how much cyanide kills people and like all this stuff came together that it was the dad who did it to his own kid. And so he got arrested, tried. I think the jury, it took him 45 minutes to deliberate and come back, and he got the death penalty. Yeah. And was executed. So that's the one instance I could find, and it wasn't a stranger doing it. It was the kid's own dad, which was really sad.
Super sad.
So that was that needle in the thing to me. Yeah, it's so hard. Like, how do you verify it unless you want to go ask? But again, if it was something being passed out, you would expect to see it.
Right.
And I'd imagine the police went around, asked a few other houses, checked candy, didn't find anybody else. Right. I would guess if they're not investigating it further.
This person who posted it said we only went to like 12 or 15 houses that night.
That's not a big.
No, that's easy to narrow down
search.
if it were a common thing. But either way, I hope that they get to the bottom of whatever happened.
Sure,
whether it was a false report or a real report, because it's bad no matter which way you look at it.
So the last thing I'd like to talk about, again, this has been a few weeks. Obviously, this is a topic of a lot of maybe controversy. What's going on in Israel right now? And so the biggest thing that's seems to come out right now is this refugee camp. Have you heard much about this?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so there was potentially a refugee camp in the Gaza area that Hamas was using as like a base of operations. And so Israel did a strike on it, which ended up, of course, in civilian casualties. Mm-hmm. Now, it was this type of thing where, they warned people, they tried to get people to leave. There's even a video of a woman who was injured in this saying, like, this is all Hamas's problem. Like, this is their fault. They made us stay here before, like, she gets kind of hushed by the people around her. Mm-hmm. And so, but everybody is now really like, oh, there needs to be a ceasefire. Israel needs to stop. And it's like, to me, it comes across as if you're a terrorist group, the moral of the story is use civilians as cover, because everybody else will then say, well, then you can't touch us. Like, it makes you immune and you can just do whatever you want as long as you're just using civilians. Yikes. Which is terrible, but everybody's calling for, this is awful. Israel has crossed the line. It's like I don't know. It drives me nuts because Hamas came in and targeted civilians at like music festivals and kidnapping people, right? They were intentionally targeting civilians Israel tries to come back against this terrorist group who's using civilians as a shield, and Israel does everything they can to avoid civilians, and yet they're the ones called like the problem and the genocidal maniacs and all this stuff. It's just weird.
It would be like asking the United States to not respond after the Pearl Harbor attacks or to not respond after 9/11.
Right.
Right. And be like, well, you know, those terrorists, they were just doing their terrorist thing. You need not respond because innocent people might get hurt. Yeah,
Right.
but thousands, potentially millions more will get hurt if we just let the terrorists reign.
Right. What are you supposed to do in this situation?
Right.
Just let...
You have to call terrorism what it is.
Right.
And then do everything you can to remove terrorism.
And
now, I grieve with any lost life.
Right.
And so if there is a way to do it without the loss of civilian life, then great. But at the same time, to do nothing will lead to a lot more loss of life.
Right. It's kind of like, and I mean, this is maybe a controversial subject as well. If you go back to World War II, like we ended up dropping nuclear bombs on Japan in cities, and we did the same thing. We dropped leaflets. We said, this is when we're going to destroy your town. Don't be there.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, it's like, war is awful. War is terrible. And war will result in casualties, and oftentimes civilian casualties. And it's terrible.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is try to avoid those, minimize those. And so it's all a matter of like the approach of it. Is your approach going in, we want to do our best to minimize civilians and do our best to not, only to make sure we're only engaging in military targets, or are we going after civilian targets primarily? Right. That's kind of the difference of the attitudes.
Right. And that's the difference between a country who really does want peace and a terrorist group. Because we saw Hamas going after civilians directly. But we see anything that Israel's doing to try and stop Hamas is going after Hamas targets. Right. And unfortunately, there has been some civilian casualties. But yeah.
Well, as always, we'll continue to pray for everything going on over there. And any civilian, like you said, it's a tragedy whenever anything like that happens. So let's jump into our main topic for today. It's a little bit of a strange one. I had this idea. I don't remember even what inspired it really, but I think maybe it was Halloween and all the stuff we talked about last week. And even before then, as we were thinking through this, I was starting to think about, the phrase that popped into my head is it a demon or a leaky pipe? Kind of, right? Okay. Is this, and so it's this idea of how do we as Christians approach spiritual warfare matters? Because I think, and we got, when we talked about this, we had people could email us at podcast@dfchurch.com. We had somebody who talks about, wrote in response to this last week, which you can do this too. Write us in, let us know what you think about this topic or our next week topic. But we were asking, like, what are your thoughts on how do you determine between actual spiritual oppression or attack versus just what happens? And this listener wrote in, he said, we're not in a battle versus flesh and blood, but against angels, principalities, rulers of this dark world, Ephesians 6. So there are absolutely spiritual forces at work. We often fall into one of two camps. There is nothing spiritual, and it's all physical explanations, or everything is spiritual. Both are obviously wrong. Yeah. The lack of recognition means we fight against the physical issues, gun violence, poverty, etc., while ignoring the deeper spiritual needs and issues. Or we tell everyone, God bless you, be filled with bread, but don't address the physical, like in James 2. Both are real. As a Baptist church, we often have a lesser view of the spiritual side of things versus other denominations, wondering why that is. And so all of that is to say, what do you think, Matt? How do we determine, or what do you think about that idea that maybe we fall either into one of two sides, like either everything's a demon after you or nothing is?
Yeah, I think that's a word of caution for Christians is because we do have like those two extremes where either I give Satan and his minions more credit than they deserve or not enough credit. There's a balance between that.
Yeah.
So to say that they don't really exist, they don't have any like authority or power or any opportunity to influence, that would be wrong. And I would be potentially setting myself up for failure in a lot of areas. But then at the same time, to blame everything on that, it discounts what God's word says about my flesh. If I'm giving too much credit to Satan and blaming him for everything, like I I choose. I make mistakes. I am broken. I'm depraved. Like it's not, and scripture speaks a lot about this. Like spiritual warfare is a very real thing.
Yeah.
But with that, I'm responsible for what I do. And as a Christian, as someone who is filled with the Holy Spirit, Satan can't control me. So like for me to say the devil made me do it,
right,
isn't true. Like that's a lie, right? Like there was one time, like the earliest, at least from what I can see, the earliest known record of the devil made me do it happened in Genesis.
Yep, I think
right when the
seems about
serpent
right
in the garden, and it was like that thing made me eat that fruit. Like it wasn't, I didn't do it. It was that thing over there. Right. And that was like the whole like beginning of just us blaming everyone for everything.
Yep.
And so I think like it's convenient now when something bad happens for me to just say, well, there's Satan trying to get at me again.
Right. So how do you know? How do you know the difference? What do you think is, how do I know when it, because we don't want to fall into either extreme. We don't want to just pretend that there isn't anything spiritual that happens, but we don't want to just blame everything without any personal responsibility. It's easy to blame.
Right.
But we know that sometimes happens. And I think back to like when we see people who are like possessed in the Bible, modern times people would say, well, that person just had, look at the symptoms described, just look like epilepsy.
Right,
There's a perfectly natural cause. And I wonder, and I've heard other authors and writers speak to this, that the ancient world did not really have a consideration of the natural and the supernatural like we do. Like they did not see a distinction. There was just reality, and it included things like spiritual forces, and it included things like gravity and fire. Like it was just, that was just how the world was. And so I wonder if you would ask one of them, well, is that epilepsy or possession? And if they knew that, you know, your brain misfires and stuff like that, and they would say, well, it's both, right? Like it's because these demons or, you know, evil spiritual powers are able to just influence you or get into your brain and affect it a certain way, that they cause these effects, right?
Yeah.
And I always thought that's weird. And so it's like, maybe this is maybe my hot take for the episode. I don't know, because I don't want to say like epilepsy isn't real.
Right.
But I do say that if we see the accounts of demon possession being a real thing, okay, and we see that it causes similar types of things, is it possible that the way that demons are able to possess you are ways that the spirit, it's so weird to think about like a spiritual being impacting a physical entity. Yeah. But then again, our souls interface with our physical bodies, and somehow that works, right? Even, and if, you know, a lot of people will say there's no such thing as a soul because it's not detectable, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's like, if you have a non-physical entity called a soul, you shouldn't be able to detect it anywhere physically because it's a non-physical entity anyway, right? It's a category problem in a way. And so if demons are these non-physical entities that can still also similarly affect people, maybe the way that their physical conduit in, you can take medicine that stops epilepsy and that blocks their ability to do things. It's just a weird way of like the combination of physical and spiritual. I don't know. This is my hot take. This is not the Bible's hot take of how do these things interact. But I think maybe there's less distinction between the quote unquote natural and supernatural world.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think the spiritual aspect of those things in our life, like that's going to be different, I think, for every person.
Sure.
So a leaky pipe, as you said, might be a very different thing for you than it was for me. The leaky pipe for me was because I tried to install it myself and I just didn't tighten it properly. And so it's leaking, and that's just my own stupidity. Like I just failed and did it. But a leaky pipe for you might be, you paid a lot of money, had someone professionally do it, and it worked perfectly for weeks, and then just all of a sudden it didn't work. And that's a different circumstance and situation. Yeah. Now I'm not saying one is the devil and one's not. Right. But I'm saying they're different circumstances, right?
Yeah, context matters. Right. Like the idea of what's happening. And going back to my like possession idea, if I all of a sudden start convulsing and like foaming at the mouth, it might just be a physical ailment. If all of a sudden my eyes turn backwards and I start speaking Latin, Maybe
probably
something
gonna
else
be a
is
little
going
bit
on. And I think it is, possession is not something that specifically is not something that is really talked about in depth biblically, especially the mechanics of it. I do think we can make a pretty good case, and I think it's pretty solid to say that if you're a Christian, if you belong to Jesus, like you're indwelt by the Holy Spirit, the possession is probably impossible. Like you can be oppressed by Satan, but I don't think if God's Spirit is deposited in us, it doesn't seem like Satan could take control of that, because Satan is not more powerful than God. So I do think when we talk about possession specifically, it's good to point out, like, as a Christian, we have authority over demonic forces as well.
Yeah, in Jesus' resurrection, he conquered the power of Satan, sin, and death in our lives. And so we need not be afraid, but we should be aware, I think is a good way to put it. Like when you look at Satan and the way that he tends to attack, I don't think he's going to be the one who like gets up in my pipes and somehow causes a leak. I think he's going to be the one who stirs up those like fleshly desires in me, those lusts in me to tempt me to sin.
Yeah.
That's one of his tactics. I think another of his tactics is to get me to move away from the truth of the gospel and who he is. I think, he uses worldly wisdom a lot to oppose godly truth.
Okay.
So the physical nature then, like all those things are in my thinking and in my feeling, my heart, right? Of like, are my affections being pulled towards Christ or pulled away from him?
Okay.
And I think Satan's going to tempt me to be pulled away from him as much as possible. Like that's going to be his goal there. So with the physical stuff, when I got COVID, did Satan give it to me so that I had to take 5 days off from doing the work of the ministry in the local church?
Yeah.
Or
Maybe.
did I just encounter somebody who
do we live in a fallen world where broken things happen?
We live in a fallen, broken world. Ever since that situation in the Garden of Eden, things haven't gotten better.
Okay, so let's take it back and let's look at a practical example biblically.
Yeah.
And kind of see maybe if this sheds any light on this question. All right, we're going to the book of Job.
Yeah, we are.
All right, so the book of Job, first of all, Job is fascinating to me because I don't know, and maybe this is just me. Okay, I'm full of hot takes this episode, apparently, because I don't know if this is just me not having studied enough. I don't know if I'm fully confident in the genre of Job.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is I don't know if it is intended to be, this is a 100% a historical book.
Okay.
And the reason I ask this question is, for instance, we know that, well, even in ancient, this is a different culture. Ancient Rome, they didn't have direct quotations. I don't think they really had that in ancient Hebraic society. And even if they did, all of Job's friends and all the discussion is this like highly poetic, beautifully written stuff. All right. So at the very least, we know that the story of it is poetically told, right? Because I doubt that Job's friends actually sat around in perfect verse, like talking to each other.
Right.
That doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah.
Okay. People don't talk in perfect poetry, just in these long flowing things. It could, so in my mind, I know we haven't even gotten to what the actual point is, but when I look at Job, all right, we've talked about this a lot. We take the Bible as 100% inspired, inerrant word of God. That does not mean every single part of it is supposed to be taken literally, right? Literal is not the equivalent of true. And I think sometimes Christians conflate those two things. Something can be true without being literal. For instance, Daniel is full of visions. All of those visions are very true. There's statues and beasts and things like that. But all of those things are symbolic interpretations of the literal thing, right? The literal things are kingdoms coming and things like that, but it's told in this very metaphorical language. Just because it's not literal doesn't make it not true. Jesus tells parables all the time. Those didn't literally happen, but Jesus really told them, right? So it does not impact inerrancy or infallibility if Job is written as an extended parable, if that's what it was intended to be. So like I said, it might be a hot take. If that's what the genre is, though, I don't think that should be a problem for us as Christians, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's written as this was a true thing that happened, but we've poetically expanded it so that we can talk about pain, suffering, Satan, God, and all these things, I think that's fine as well.
Yeah.
But the thing that really makes me wonder about the non-literality of it, besides all the poetic talking, the fact that at the end he just gets like everything back, but it's like you got new kids,
it's like leveled up,
and like you got more, but at the same time, does that really help if all your kids died and then in a couple years you just had 4 more kids?
Right. It doesn't mean I'm going to forget my other 4.
Are you like, sweet, I'm back to where I started?
Yeah. No.
Like,
and yeah. So if it were like this perfect resolution to it, for me, I would want like, okay, if you're going to give me all this stuff, then like wipe my memory of the pain and hurt that happened from that.
Right.
So that
resurrect my old kids back.
Yeah. Or bring that back somehow. Yeah.
And
I want to real quick that Job is history told through story.
Okay.
So there's a lot of probably historical event in it that happened, but it's told through a very story way, right? Obviously with all the poetry, maybe some exaggeration on things. I mean, if you look at the way it's written, whoever the author is, now we know that all scripture was inspired by God, right?
Right.
But whoever wrote it down was given insight into heavenly spiritual realm conversations that happened, as well as physical conversations that happened, kind of like simultaneously, because we kind of go back and forth between a conversation in heaven, some stuff happening on earth, some other things going on in the middle, and the writer, at least the story that we get to see through this, we see it from all those angles, which is really cool, actually.
It's really cool.
But no matter what the genre is, I do think that as Christians, there's a lot we can take from it and learn from it. That I think maybe that is about to get into why you brought up Job.
Right. So getting back into why we actually got to Job is this idea of all these natural disasters happen.
Yeah.
You know, his kids are killed. His health gets taken away. Like he gets, COVID, but it's worse because he's got boils. And his, all this terrible stuff happens to him. And in this instance, it is from Satan, right? Satan and God are having like let's see what'll Job do. Satan's like, he's only worships you because of all the good you've given him. And so this gives us an example where all those physical things are actually also spiritual things.
Yeah.
So in that sense, should we just say everything is both? Instead of saying one or the other, everything is actually both.
Right. So the question of, is it Satan or just a leaky pipe? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the answer? Is that the spiritual forces that are involved in our world are integrated and connected with so much physicality that you can't necessarily clearly distinguish?
Right. And I think this goes back, I guess, less to what I do and more what happens to or around me. Right.
Okay.
So like, because I started off talking about like I'm responsible for the choices I make, right? And Satan's going to tempt me that way, but ultimately I'm the one that chooses that. Okay. But did I choose like Job? Did I choose for my kids to be taken from me? Did I choose for that sickness to come? Did I choose for my wife to die? No. No. I didn't choose. I didn't do something that caused that per se. And so obviously with Job, it is the work of Satan. We clearly see that. Right. But we also see throughout the rest of scripture and just history in general that just bad stuff happens. Right. Again, it goes back to that broken world that we live in currently. And so bad stuff is going to happen. It's safe to assume that you will have good and bad things come and go regularly in your life. Now, sometimes it's because of a choice I make. Sometimes it's because of a choice someone else made that affects me.
Right.
Again, fallen, broken world, there will be hurt and there will be sorrow. There will be death. This stuff is going to come. And then, sometimes it's Satan causing these things to happen, or his demons causing these things to happen in order, again, because Satan's crafty.
Yeah.
He is smart. And so he is going to do things, not just because he wants bad to happen. Look at the story of Job. Satan's sole purpose in that torment was to get Job to deny God, to walk away from his
kind of
faith.
Going back to what you were saying before, like that's what Satan does, is pull us away from God.
Yeah. And so if, let's say I've done a great job balancing my finances and I have some emergency funds set up and that leaky pipe comes and I'm like, all right, that stinks. I got some money here in savings. I'm going to fix that leaky pipe and we'll move on and it'll be great.
Yeah.
If Satan knows that, now he can't read my mind.
Sure.
But he's smart enough to see my circumstance and he can put 2 and 2 together. Okay. And so if he knows that I'm covering that, that's probably not going to be what he chooses to attack me with.
Right.
But if he knows that finances are a big struggle for me and that leaky pipe is going to cause some marital problems, that leaky pipe is going to cause me to maybe think about reaching my hand in the offering plate as it comes by on Sunday morning or things like that, then absolutely Satan's going to attack me that way. He can see what I do. He knows where I've fallen and where my weaknesses are. Yeah. He's heard the arguments I've had with my kids or my wife about different things. And so that's where, sure, he's probably going to attack me.
Yeah. And that's why we don't pass an offering plate anymore. And remove the temptation.
The temptation's gone. I love it. Kidding. You can give online at dfchurch.com. And so like Satan can't necessarily do anything he wants. He is still limited and bound. But he is given some freedom to go and do. And here's the cool thing. God's not afraid.
Right.
I'm confident in the fact that God has me. Yeah. And so I don't need to be afraid either. So I need to approach these situations, this junk that happens to in around my life with discernment and saying, okay, God, what is it that I can learn through this? Right. I need to resist the devil. I need to flee from temptation. This is all in scripture for you guys. Like all that is very true. And in the midst of that, God, what are you teaching me? What can I learn? Like, how can I fix my eyes on Jesus instead of on Satan? And we've actually, maybe we'll talk about this, I think, with one of the questions that came in. Yep. But that's a key factor in the midst of all of it. When I focus on what Satan is doing and the bad things that are happening, that's going to bring me down and I'm going to be much more likely to give in to some of that temptation. Sure. I'm going to have a harder time resisting the devil. But when I'm focused on Christ and the good that he is and the good that he's provided for me, those potential attacks from Satan are silly. Right. Like, because I have that shield of faith up. So all those fiery darts that come at me, they're just pss, pss, pss. Like nothing bad's happening. Right? It's like, what's up, man? Come at me, bro. But again, if I'm distracted from it and I'm just staring at all those fiery darts coming at me, I'm freaking out and I'm running and they're hitting me. Right. Instead of just being confident in who Christ is in my life.
All right. So I'm going to give you another scenario. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what your answer is. All right. So we as Christians have power, God is more powerful than Satan. Satan can't really possess us because we're indwelt by the Holy Spirit. And in fact, Satan, we don't need to worry about him. Okay. All that's the what we've kind of said so far, right? Now, what is the number one way, according to at least our culture and society, that you get possessed? I don't know if you've got this. What's the number one way that people in movies get possessed?
They sell their soul to the devil.
No. What is the one activity they partake in?
I don't watch these movies. Ouija board?
A Ouija board. Thank you. All right. So as a Christian, knowing everything, can you play with a Ouija board? Because Satan can't do anything to you. You can't get possessed. Is there anything wrong with it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it'd be like saying that knowing that God has forgiven all your past, present, and future like sins of the world, I can just go on sinning and doing whatever I want, right? Because he's going to forgive me. I'm going to sin. I'm going to ask for forgiveness. We're golden, right? No. Paul says, by no means should I continue on sinning.
Okay, but is it sinful if you're not able to be possessed? Because you're not actually, you're using, I saw an ad for this, the new AI powered Ouija board. It's a real thing.
No.
It is a real thing.
Dude, Lord, come quickly. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
AI is a demon? I think somebody asked me this question once already, but can you use an AI? It's like, what if is the analogy better? You find out you're impervious to damage, so you jump off a building just because it's fun.
I think that's different. So what is a Ouija board? Let's start with that.
Okay. Oh, well, the new ones are AI powered, but
no, let's go back to like the original.
It's in Stranger Things. Not really. They put a similar thing to that on the wall. No, it's a board that has all like letters, yes and no, and a little like easily slidable thing that can center on a letter at a time. And the idea is you call upon the spirits to take control of your body and move your fingers to answer questions from the beyond. It's a form of divination.
I think you answered the question, right? So like,
I hope you know when I asked this question, I wasn't being serious.
Like for those of you that maybe have questioned this, because I've actually had conversations with students who are like, "Oh, we're doing that. It's super fun." Like Leviticus 19, right? 31 says, "Don't turn to mediums. Don't seek out spiritists. You're going to be defiled by them." Right. So I think of that as like the Ouija board. The purpose, another name for it is actually a spirit board.
Yep.
And so like I am seeking out some sort of non-Christ honoring divination.
Yeah.
Right. And so scripture tells me I'm going to be defiled by that.
Is there any way, because we've talked, all right, so this is going to tie us back into last week with Halloween and everything like that.
Yep.
There are paganistic and evil things associated with it, but we as Christians say we're not doing that. We are going to dress up as, fun costumes. We're going to get candy. There's nothing wrong with that side of it.
Yeah.
We're redeeming it.
Yep.
Is there any way to redeem the Ouija board?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it is a form of witchcraft.
Okay.
And Galatians, even if you don't like Old Testament, we can go to New Testament. Galatians talks about fleeing from all sorts of sin and immorality, and includes witchcraft in that conversation.
Sweet.
And so I would say, no, we need to avoid that. It would be like saying, well, okay, so Halloween, the pagan practices, there was at one point in time as part of some of those pagan traditions and other holidays early on, there was like some child sacrifice. I still love and trust Jesus. And I know that those kids, God has them in his control, so I can participate that in it also, right? No, like those are the elements we're not participating in. So if there's other holidays that like Ouija boards are a part of, but the other parts of that holiday are fun and festive and harmless, fine. It's the act of, I think, playing with the Ouija board that I would say would be the problem. It's not the things that might surround it, if that says.
So the AI Ouija board is deactivated as of November 1st. There was like a special thing they were doing online.
Well, it's All Saints Day
for Halloween.
Oh okay. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I can't believe that exists.
Let me take you another step.
Okay.
Is it a sin to play with a magic 8-ball?
Okay, so then you get into some silly stuff with all of that, right? It's like rolling a dice or like flipping a coin. What am I going to have for dinner today? Is it going to be this or that? Heads is this, tails is that. So the magic 8-ball. So if I say, ask it a funny question. Hey, am I going to win $1 million today? Shake it. It says, try again later. Did I just sin? Yeah, I don't think the magic 8-ball, even though it has the word magic in its name, is actually a form of witchcraft and inviting the spiritual realm into things. I do think that's just a silly
So I'm just being the Nathan's advocate.
Right, as you should.
If I were to approach a Ouija board in the same sense of like, I'm just being goofy, I don't really think anything's going to happen. I'm just getting a funny answer like I would get from a magic 8-ball.
Right, but I think
would that make it okay?
And I've never used a Ouija board.
I haven't either.
The little bit that I know about it, I think it was designed for these occult-like practices. I think the magic 8-ball was designed as a silly kid's toy. And so I would separate those. Now, still use discernment. Like if I'm
making major life decisions,
right? It's like, hey, magic 8-ball. Should I go ahead and just? I know I have to pay my rent this month, but that $1,200, man. Sorry, wrong economy. That $3,000
better.
I should put it in the lottery, right?
Yeah.
Oh yes, okay. No, that's stupid. Don't be dumb, right? Like that, obviously. But if you're just like being silly with it, I don't think there's the same occult like beginnings with the Magic 8 Ball as there is with the Ouija board.
But doesn't it
I don't have one
more
of
important
either
what
of
it
those.
is now? Like Ouija boards are made by Hasbro as like a board game. It's a child's toy.
So
Same
we
or
should
Magic 8
cancel
balls.
Hasbro.
Apparently.
Yeah, that's what I just heard. Yeah.
What do you guys think?
That's a
Email
weird one.
podcast at dfchurch.com on if you think there's any way for a Christian to use a Ouija board or any of the things we just talked about. But as we kind of wrap up this main topic, then I think the biggest thing as we look at this question is like, what do we do with it? Does it, in some ways, does it matter if it's the natural consequences of living in a fallen world or Satan oppressing you?
Right.
Is our response different based off which one it is? Or is our response going to be the same regardless?
I think our response is the same regardless.
Okay.
We need to be careful with how we react, right? Like I don't want to sin in my reaction to bad things that might happen.
Right.
And like I mentioned earlier, I want to say, okay, obviously the situation stinks, but God, what can I learn from it?
Yeah.
Right. Not blaming him, saying, God, why would you do this to me?
Right.
Like, but okay, God, this happened. I don't know why or how or the circumstances around it, or you spend some time actually looking into the why this happened.
Yeah.
Right. Like, did this bad thing happen because of something stupid I did or failed to do even? But always asking, okay, God, what is it that you want me to learn from it? Yeah. Another thing popped in my head about the Magic 8 Ball. Just for kicks and giggles.
It's just fun.
You know those little like fortune
what was
teller,
that called?
are
A
those
cootie catcher.
That's
what
a
we
weird
call
name.
them.
You know what I'm talking about? Like those of you that are on YouTube, you can see me like
it's where
flicking my fingers. You fold the paper down.
Now it's pick a number, and they pick the number, and then you do that many.
Yeah.
Pick a color, and then you do that. Like and then you pull it out, and you get a little answer. Those are so fun.
Again, Magic 8 Ball, that little thing, super silly, super just kind of fun. If you're using it with the intention of, to divine the future or whatever you might want to call it, then sure, that's where anything is bad. If you're using anything to take the place of God and his plan and provision in your life, it's going to be a bad thing. And so I have to be super careful with that. The Ouija board, some people might want to argue with me and say, well, that's in the same category. Because if I'm just using it for silly fun, but that one I'll put in the camp of, nah, it's just a little bit more.
Okay.
It's a well-known.
Is it? So this is the thing you were talking about, right?
Yeah, that thing.
Cookie catcher.
Yep. Okay.
Whirlybird. They call them other things.
A whirlybird.
So
that's a fun name.
Is this a food sacrifice to idols issue? Are there some Christians who it might not be a problem for, and some who it might be because of where you're coming at it from?
For the Ouija board?
Yeah.
I'd have a hard time with it. I would really have a hard time with that. It is a well-known divination tool. And yes, Hasbro is misleading children by marketing it to them. But I think this is absolutely a tool of Satan.
Okay.
That I don't want. This is probably one of the few things that I am a little more prudish about.
Yeah.
Like I tend to be like Halloween. Like
right.
I as a pastor and as a Christ follower, I enjoy celebrating it. It's kind of fun. Obviously, I don't partake in the evil side of it.
You don't put needles in kids' candy?
I don't put needles in kids' candy. But like this is one of the few things that I'm like, I really believe that this is a tool of Satan.
Interesting.
And I
is that just from our cultural
it could be
connections?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, and it's always good to ask those questions.
So my first experience with a Ouija board, not like I played it, but hearing about it, I was in elementary school, and the kid who was telling me about, I did this with my big brother or whatever. Like the way they described it, it was creepy, and it made me feel as like a 9-year-old just icky.
Right.
That same kid. Now this might be a whole nother story. The only like in America real spiritual creepy thing that I've ever experienced was shortly after that, when that same kid, I was walking home from school and I saw him sitting out on a field. And like his eyes were kind of weird looking as if they rolled back in their head. And there was just this deep, low mumbling coming out of his mouth. Like I walked long way around to get home because it freaked me out. And it was the same kid that was talking about all this dark and creepy stuff from this Ouija board. And so that probably like obviously tainted me. I want nothing to do with it. Like, it just seems like that is inviting Satan in to have a little party with you. And he's not invited to my party.
That's fair. Well, let's move on to my favorite segment, Ask the AI Anything. This week, I was trying to think of something that was going to topically connect to this, and I landed on this.
It is Christmas season. You can do a Christmas AI.
I didn't do
November 1st. It's Christmas time.
I do Thanksgiving AI before I do.
Thanksgiving is a day. Christmas is a season.
No, it could be Thanksgiving.
You're welcome.
Season.
I'm so excited that it's November now because I'm decorating you guys.
You can start watching your Christmas movies.
Yeah. Sweet. Listening to music. Oh, it's gonna be so good.
Oh boy, bring out Mariah Carey. Isn't there some joke? Maybe we made this last year about like this is the time when if Mariah Carey comes out and sees her shadow, we get 12 more weeks of Christmas or something.
Yes, there is a joke about that.
All right, but I went with more spooky because we're talking about what we're talking about.
Right.
I said, what is the top 10 list of the craziest true stories of demon possession?
Oh, okay.
Because I just wanted to see what AI was, and I was curious how I'd ever heard of any of these throughout history.
Is this like PG? Is it safe for my kids to keep listening?
I mean, as far as yeah,
all right.
It seems fine. Number 10. See if you've heard of any of these. I don't know. So here's the thing. Are these true? I don't know. AI could just be making it all up because we're too lazy to fact check
AI
it.
has a Ouija board. I don't know if I can trust it anymore, Nathan.
No. Hasbro gave a Ouija board to the AI and asked it to pretend to be the ghosts.
But okay.
All right. Number 10, the possession of George Lukens in 1788.
I thought you were saying George Lucas.
That's what episode 1 was all about. No, although that would explain a lot.
Yeah.
George Lukens, also known as the Yatin demoniac. I don't know how you say that word.
Demoniac.
Was a young man in England who displayed symptoms of possession, including speaking in languages he didn't know and contorting his body unnaturally. The case was widely publicized in its time. Have you heard of George Lukens?
Nope.
Okay. 2007, the exorcism of Janet Moses. So this is more modern. That's what I think is interesting, because if it's 2007, we should have video of this, and maybe we should be able to make a better determination. I don't know. This modern case took place in New Zealand where Janet Moses died during an exorcism.
Yeah.
Family members believed she was possessed and attempted to perform a Maori exorcism, resulting in a tragic outcome.
Now, what is that type of exorcism?
It
sounds like it must.
Maori's New Zealand, like Islander. Whale Rider. Did you ever see the movie Whale Rider?
I did not.
It's good stuff. I don't know what they do in that type of an exorcism. What is a Maori? If you know what a Maori, I mean, I could Google it, but we're going to go on to the next one. Number 8, the possession of Clara Germana Seal in 1906. A South African nun was reported to display extreme aversion to religious objects and allegedly spoken languages she didn't know. Witnesses claimed she exhibited supernatural strength. After an exorcism, she returned to normal.
Huh.
And this was 1906.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not that long ago. You probably could have had a picture of it at least.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder how many of these were actual possessions versus not. Number 7, a real-life haunting in Connecticut. That was a movie. 1986. The Snedeker family moved into a former funeral home in Connecticut. That's your first mistake. And experienced a series of paranormal events, including possession and demonic manifestations. Their story became the basis for the movie, The Haunting in Connecticut. So is there anything to it that a place like a funeral home or something where death was more prevalent might be more likely active for demonic activity? What do you think?
I mean, if I were a demon, that seems like a fun
place
space.
to hang out. It is creepy. It's just creepy for me. Like, I would never live in a funeral home. That sounds just a bad idea.
Even if I were absolutely confident that, like, the demon haunting was irrelevant, it just still seems weird. I don't know.
Number 6, the possession of Michael Taylor, 1974. Okay. Michael Taylor, a British man, was involved in a gruesome murder. He claimed to be possessed by demons. The devil made me do it.
There it is.
In the book. During the crime and subsequent arrest, Taylor was eventually acquitted on the grounds of diminished responsibility. And the case has been cited as the example of legal implications of demonic possession claims. How did he won in court and got away with murder by saying the devil made me do it. That's interesting.
That's
because
weird.
that does have big legal implications, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, it was so it looks like insanity is what
He actually got
he was acquitted for officially.
So they basically said, you must be crazy if you think demons possess you.
Right. And so he went to the Broadmoor Hospital for 2 years,
Interesting.
spent another 2 years in a secure ward elsewhere before being released. So, but yeah, that's really interesting. If I can, not I, but people can use that as their excuse now.
Okay, this one's interesting. Number 5, the Watsika Wonder in 1877. Here's where AI start to wonder about you. The Watsika Wonder involved 2 young girls, Mary Lawrence Venom and Mary Roth, who claimed to be inhabited by the spirit of the deceased Mary Roth. So it said there was a girl named Mary Roth who was inhabited by a dead girl named with the same name?
I think,
Or did it get confused?
I think it got confused. I think the first name you said
Was 2 people.
No, say it again.
All right. The Watsika Wonder involved 2 young girls, Mary Lawrence Venom and Mary Roth, who claimed to be inhabited by the spirit of the deceased Mary Roth. But how could they be inhabited?
Yeah, was it just the
first
Mary
name?
Lawrence Venom that was inhabited by Mary Roth?
I don't know. The case attracted significant attention and investigated by both medical and spiritual experts.
Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah.
I just looked it up for you.
Okay, thank you.
According to Stevens and Hodgson, who are they? Physical researcher of the American Society for Physical Research.
Perfect. That's
Venom
a redundant
allowed
title.
Yeah, Venom allowed Mary Roth to possess her body for about 15 weeks, during which time she could allegedly recognize all Roth's friends and relatives, was familiar with all the objects in Roth's home, could retell incidents and stories from her childhood and past life. Convinced that Venom was a reincarnation of their daughter, the Roth family allowed the girl to live with them for several weeks.
Creepy. Number 4, the case of Robbie Mannheim, 1949. The events surrounding Robbie Mannheim served as the inspiration for the classic film The Exorcist. The boy, which was a girl in that movie, exhibited violent and bizarre behavior, including moving furniture and speaking in tongues. Catholic priests conducted exorcisms, and the story became a cultural sensation.
Right.
Creepy.
It's crazy.
Number 3. Wait, didn't we already see this one? Clara Ciramon Seal. No, Claire Germana. Yeah, they put her on here twice. No, it's the same one.
I thought Germana was the first person, not
Germana.
Saramon.
It says Germana.
Oh,
here.
okay.
I just read it wrong. So they put her on twice.
Was she possessed 2 separate times?
No, it's the exact same text. AI, come on. Number 2, the Smurl haunting in 1986.
Here's the thing with the lacking of this AI list. It's just a reminder that you can sponsor us to get ChatGPT 4, the better version, for just $20 a month. And then we don't have these issues anymore.
I was going to say, with the lacking of this AI list, don't trust AI Ouija boards with any actual answers.
Or Hasbro Ouija boards.
Yeah. The Smurl haunting in 1986. The Smurl, which almost looks like Smurf, family claimed they were tormented by evil spirits in their Pennsylvania home for years. The alleged haunting included physical attacks, unexplained doors, and strange sounds. The case was investigated by paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren, getting widespread media attention.
Wow.
They have had a lot of movies made about them recently.
Okay.
I think The Conjuring, Annabelle, all those are based off the Warrens.
So this
cases.
one obviously has hit pop culture a lot more than the rest.
That one definitely has. All right, and finally, number 1. Oh, I've seen this movie too. The Possession of Annalise Michel, 1976. Annalise Michel's case is one of the most famous and controversial instances of alleged demonic possession. The story became the basis for the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which was actually really well made, but very scary. Annalise exhibited erratic behavior and spoke in strange languages, leading to her family and priests performing numerous exorcisms. Sadly, she passed away due to malnutrition and dehydration, and her death led to legal action against the priests involved.
Wow.
So that's the most famous one of apparently what AI thinks.
I don't like these at all.
You don't like any of those?
I don't like demon possession.
Well, I mean,
just kind of not my favorite.
Have you heard of any of these?
Not the names and all the movies. I've heard those titles. I don't watch those types of movies. Like those don't appeal to me whatsoever. No, not because like a holier than thou moment. I'm a scaredy cat moment. And like, I don't like the horror stuff. I don't like the gore stuff. And like, I do like some psychological thrillers.
Yeah.
But like all the exorcism ones, and I'm out. They're scary.
We have a friend, not we, because I don't think you know him, but we have a friend.
The collective we, for those of you watching online or listening to us right now.
We have a friend who he's a Christian, and he always really loved horror movies and still does, as far as I know, to this day. And his, thought process behind it was they illustrate spiritual reality so clearly that he finds a lot of redemptive points to that, and that it shows that kind of what we've talked about today, there is a demonic world and there are spiritual forces at work, and that, just the way that these things occur. And so he had no issues as a Christian still watching a lot of these movies.
Yeah.
Thought it was interesting.
That's why I like Nightmare Before Christmas, the redemption value. That's like as horror
is there
spooky
any
as I
redemption to that?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Dude, another podcast, but yeah, Jack Skellington's a good example of why you like pursuing God's will for your life and being content with who he's called you to be matters so much.
We could do a whole episode about Christian themes in unexpected movies. I would talk about Pulp Fiction and the themes of redemption.
You would talk about that, yeah.
We've been watching that at home again lately because I just really like it.
It's funny.
Well, let's move on to our listener mail segment. Again, you can email podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com with your comments, questions, or concerns. We love to hear from you. And we got a couple in. First of all, we got one that was talking about dressing up. So this last week, we asked this question about, like, if I want to dress up as a biblical story, can I dress up as the possessed man? Because, like, it's in the Bible.
Right.
And he says, well, the Bible also describes how Judas hung himself and his guts spilled out, or how Judah had sex with his daughter-in-law, or many other acts that didn't bring God glory. So I would say dress up in things that bring God glory. So is Satan subjected by a nameless angel per revelation, or the demon-possessed man clothed in his right mind? So you could dress up as a demon-possessed man after he was exorcismed.
Exercised.
I don't think you say exercised. I say exorcismed. So that's okay. You just look like a Bible man at that point, though.
Right.
But you say, like, but I was possessed. Is that how you do it?
I think that's exactly how you do it, Nathan. Yeah.
But what you're saying is you shouldn't dress up as Judah with his guts spilled out. Judah, not Judah, Judas.
I was like, oh, Judah.
You're Judah.
Yeah, so
Judas, sorry.
Because potentially that is an image that we don't necessarily want to put in little people's minds right away.
Little people?
Yeah, like the little plastic toys. No, like children who are walking around on Halloween.
Oh boy, unhinged. All right.
It's the end of the podcast.
It's the end of the episode. Yep. We're getting into the tough questions. We also had, speaking of costumes, biblical costumes was like the AI list last week. We had somebody write in and suggest, it's a little, all right, this is where your kids can turn the podcast off. They suggested a biblical costume of Adam and Eve, but not for going outside, just for you and your spouse. And as a bonus, read the Song of Solomon to each other.
Bonus. I love it. Yeah.
So that's fun. You could have, and this is what we talked about at youth group last night, right? Within the context of your marriage, if that's what you want your Halloween costumes to be, like, go nuts.
And always say your hair is as a flock of goats descending from Gilead.
Yes, you can quote
There's some pickup lines for you guys if you need it.
Okay, real quick. There was a Christian comedian who was pretty popular in the 90s named Mark Lowry. Mm-hmm. He also sang with like the Gaither vocal band. He was a singer also. He wrote a song of pickup lines, all based off Song of Solomon. Your hair is like a flower, legs and like a tree, something like that. He also did like parodies of Christian songs by like Amy Grant and stuff. He was like the Christian Weird Al. That's why my parents got me his tape.
I love it.
It was fun. Anyway, our last email. Let's take a right turn into more serious topics. Our last email for this week.
It's an emotional roller coaster this morning.
We are getting all over the place, Matt. This is the email that we got today. Yeah. Again, it's a little more serious. Okay. This person says, how do I stop watching porn? I'm too good on computers and blockers don't keep me out of trouble. I don't have a computer or phone in my room. I'm too young to get married, so I can't follow Paul's advice. we can talk about what that is.
Right.
I can muscle through about 2 weeks, but then I just give up, saying, what's the point? I've tried accountability partners, but the embarrassment of admitting failure doesn't prevent me from failing.
Right. Wow.
So I figured we'd go to you with this, Matt, not because I know that you've had a lot of resources and talks with,
right,
especially with students and things like this have come with it. And this guy says he's too young to get married.
We assume it's a student because he's too young to get married. Yeah.
What do you think about this? I'm sure this is a big topic.
So I think it's important first to hear that you are not what you do, right? So your addiction to porn does not have to define you. You're not a failure because of it, and God doesn't not love you because of that. So I think that's really important to hear first.
Right.
Second, to hear that you're not alone. This is one of the greatest struggles of humanity. It's the lusts of our flesh, right?
Right.
And it's not just, I'm assuming it's a boy. It's not just boys, it's girls as well who struggle with this type of stuff. But there's freedom and there's redemption and there's forgiveness found in Christ. And so, my biggest first piece of advice is stop focusing on your failures and start focusing on Christ. The more, and I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, the more that we focus on the bad, the more the bad draws us in. It's like if you're driving, and I don't know how old you are, if you're getting to that driving age, but if I stare at a different point off the side of the road, I start drifting towards that because that's where my focus is. Even though I know I'm supposed to be going down this way, I'll go that other direction. I need to look towards the target that I'm going after. Like Paul says, I need to keep my eyes on the prize and run the race, right? That's before me, that's ahead of me. And so that's keeping my eyes fixed on Jesus. Right. So it's not like I have to stop watching porn. It's I have to love Jesus more.
Right.
I need to look to him. Right. Because he's the one who's going to fill those voids. You have this emptiness in your heart that porn is filling. Now, there's also a lot of science behind this that talks about how it's rewiring your brain the more you look at it and the chemical reactions that happen. There's a whole lot going on. But in the midst of all that, there's freedom in Christ. And so I need to pursue him. And I still would encourage you to have the accountability. It's less about, like you were mentioning this earlier to me, it's not about the embarrassment.
Right. It's not that it's like you're hoping that the embarrassment prevents you. It's more having somebody who understands what you're going through and is there to like build you up and help point you again back to Jesus. It's like, and this is true of any sin or anything that we deal with. We need to focus less on not sinning and more on Jesus. And I think that is where sometimes we can get off.
Yeah. We miss the idea that Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. I think we stop at author a lot. Like, okay, I believe that Jesus died for me.
Right.
But Jesus is also the one who perfects it, who brings the complete sanctification, right? And being made right in Christ. And like, as a Christian, as I grow in my relationship with him, I look more and more like him.
Right. So when they said they can't follow Paul's advice, what do you think they're referring to?
I assume it is about how it's better for you to get married than to live in your lust if you can't restrain yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because he talks about that in Corinthians, I think it is.
They're too young to get married.
Yep.
So if this person's listening, I don't know right now, what would you recommend their next step be?
Yeah. Find a trusted Christ follower in your life. Who can help point you to Jesus in the midst of it. Confess it to them. Before that, even confess it to God, right? Have this conversation with him. It's not that he doesn't know what's going on already. He just wants to hear from you, right? Like you're his beloved child. He knows you. He loves you. He wants you to come to him and talk about your shortcomings. And maybe spend some time in God's word.
Right.
Chances are, maybe you read the Bible every day. I don't know, but you're maybe just reading it to check it off a list and you're not reading it to get to know the heart of God. So read it. And when you open it up this week, look for his heart and his character and his person and his desire for you. And then start pursuing that. I think that's a huge place to start. And like, I'm available for you. I assume because we got the question in, I might know you and have some sort of connection with you as part of this community here.
Yeah.
And so I'm available as a resource, and someone to encourage you and pray for you. Again, we're assuming this is a student, so your small group leaders, if you're part of our small groups here, find them. Parents are a good resource. And I know that's the most embarrassing thing possible is to confess that to your parents. But guess what? They know you and they love you even more than I might or your small group leader might. And they probably want what's best for you as well. And so they want to guide you through this. I have a couple books and resources that I can give you that would help as well. If you have Right Now Media, there's actually a couple really good sessions on there about it. One of them is 20 Truths to Help Overcome my porn addiction, I think. So it was someone who was like just deep in it in the 80s. Wow. And has since like come out of it and been clean and sober, as the phrase goes. But it's just 20 different truths from God's word that changed his thinking, helping him again to focus on Christ and not on the problem. And he has experienced that freedom and redemption. So a good option there, but I'm happy to provide those resources as well. If you want to email us, we will send them to you.
Well, we will also post some of those. I might post some in the description of this episode as well. So definitely check that out if you're watching this. And that is all the time we have for today. But next week, we have a pretty fun episode. We're going to be joined again remotely by one of our missionaries. So you're not going to want to miss that. We're going to figure out exactly what it is that they're doing and kind of how we always do. Talk about what's going well, what their struggles are, and how we can pray for them. So tune in next week. We'll see you then.
Bye, guys.